Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Whenever possible, I like to include figures with my scale model builds. I think they add a sense of scale and storytelling. So let's look at some US Armor Infantry for the upcoming M8 build. Some of the challenges that keep modelers from using figures include painting faces and skin tones. Additionally, the thought of painting layers of fabric color from shadows to highlights can be a daunting task. Today, we'll address some simple techniques to make those tasks easier to tackle. Fully assembled, they fit the bill, with a vehicle commander and a gunner in the turret, and a driver and a radio man on the front hatches. I've done several videos on how I like to paint skin tones, so I'll just show the end results from each step. This time, I started from a light gray primer instead of using my usual black. But the process starts the same, with a sand brown as a base. Then some thin layers of violet and burnt red. The red is used to bring some of the ruddiness to the skin, and the violet is used to deepen the shadowed areas on the face. Then all of this is gone over with several layers of a red beige that has been diluted to a wash-like consistency. This is my basic skin tone for fair-skinned figures. All of this was left to dry completely before I added a wash with Army Painter's Flesh Tone. Here we can see I've come back and painted the eyes and established some highlights with Vallejo's basic skin color. And that's it for these figures. All told, these took me about 2-hour long sessions over a couple of days. Uniforms. There are so many options out there for what color US cavalry or armor infantry actually used. I took inspiration from this old color picture of actual tankers. I'm going to go with brown jackets over green pants, with the driver in full green. Some of the figures have shirts that show through and t-shirts. The t-shirts just got a little bit, a dab of white. And once that was dry, the actual shirts themselves were a combination of a desert yellow and a brown olive drab to kind of make them a lighter tan color than the rest of the brown jacket. So I'm going to start the process with US dark green for the helmets, and khaki for the web belts, and leather for the holsters, boots, and goggles. Painting these bits first and trying to be somewhat careful staying the lines will give you some latitude, and that you're painting details first, and then the large colors you can come right back and cover up any over splash from the detail and redefine that edge. After letting the detail painting dry, it's time to get to the two major colors on the figures. Starting with the trousers, I used a combination of an army green and desert yellow to give me a lighter tone of olive green. And the key here is to bring the green bits just up to the edge of the details. Like on the web belt, you can see how on the back I just kind of bring it up to the edge, cover up any splash over paint, and make a nice clean defined edge. And then we can pull the rest of the paint down the full length of the trouser section till we get to the boots, and then we kind of do the opposite. Paint the cuff and be careful around the boot, and pull the paint up into the rest of the green parts of the pants. And since there aren't any details on the trousers that aren't the same color as the trousers, it's really just a matter of kind of painting in blocks. The figure that I'm calling the Radio Man also got his jacket painted at the same time in the same color as the trousers. So like I said earlier, the key here is to just take your time when you're up near the transition areas and like around the boots and the belt webbing and the bottom of the jacket and the holster, and then go ahead and just get the color on with a big brush the rest of the way. With the trousers complete, we can move on to the jackets. I used straight olive drab for the jackets, which should give us a little shade difference between the jacket and the shirts. Remembering that the shirts, we added a little bit of that desert yellow to lighten up the olive drab. And again, for the jackets, we use the exact same painting technique that we used on the trousers. Line up to the detail parts and block paint the rest. For the cuffs and collars of the jackets, and a bit of the waistline when you could see it past the web belt, I came back in and painted those with a German Camo brown. This brown is a nice light chocolatey brown color, and it kind of gives you that darker brown color you see on the photographs of these jackets, where the cuffs and the collars are lined with a different material than the actual jackets are made from. The last bits to paint are the goggles, gloves, and binoculars. The goggles just got an all-over leather color, including the straps, and I'll come back and repaint the lenses later. The gloves, I initially painted them with a leather color, and then I looked at it and said, that's completely wrong. And I came back and repainted over that with a khaki color, which the leather being underneath gave them a little slightly different tone on the khaki on the web belt, so that looked nice. And the binoculars, I just painted those black. So after getting all the other details painted, it's time to paint the final important details: the Army unit patch, infantry armor, and those stripes. Starting with a flat black, it helps define the shape and get that black outline set. And while that dries, it's time for some yellow at the top of the armor triangle, just a simple flat yellow, and don't worry if you go heavy, as yellow is easy to cover up. Next is the red, and that's in the lower right-hand corner. Just make sure you have a fine point and don't overload the brush. Then start in the middle, get that straight line across the bottom of the yellow, and head down and back to the middle. Again, you can cover the red with the blue, but the yellow is going to be tough to touch up. Lastly, we repeat for the lower left corner with some blue. It's almost just kind of a dab to the corner and then pull it back to the far corner. To finish the rank patches, we'll come back with some khaki and outline the insignia, leaving black to the outside and the center. I kind of just use the edge of the brush, almost like in a dry brushing motion, to get the paint on the raised insignias and not cover up all the black. All that's left is to add some oil wash to bring out the shadows. I used green on the trousers and a mix of black and burnt umber for everything else but the skin. And don't worry about going too heavy with the wash, as we'll come back in with a brush and some thinner to mop up any wash that isn't in the lowest of the recesses. Now the figures get set aside, just to let the oil paint set up before we come back in with the matte finish. When I reviewed the figures, they still looked a little flat, so I thought I need to bring some highlights in. And what I did is I used a very light dry brush of tan earth, which I evenly brushed over all the clothing, including the green trousers and the jackets, just to make them kind of tie them together. And so now here we have the finished figures. Note that the goggle lenses got filled in with a lighter shade of the helmet green, and then liberally coating them with gloss varnish once that was dry. While I showed one figure getting painted all the way through, I did the other three off camera at the same time. This keeps the flow going, and by the time the fourth figure is painted, the first one is dry enough to move on to the next step. All told, again, we're talking about maybe 2 hours over 3 or 4 days, depending on how long you let the oil paints dry, but it wasn't bad. So I hope you enjoyed this figure painting session, and if you have any tips, I would love to hear about them in the comments. I'm always looking to add new techniques to my painting repertoire, if you would. So next up, we need to get the vehicle for these guys ready and set up the diorama scene. Until then, happy hobbying.